I was hurrying home from work. It was already dark and frosty. The month of December, after all. Since I worked in one city and lived in another, I had to take the electric train. In the morning, to work, in the evening home. The journey took a little less than an hour. It was Friday, and I was in a good mood. I went up to the deserted platform and waited for the train. There was not a soul on the platform. It was in the middle of nowhere, near an industrial zone, and as a rule, there were always few people here, but today, it was completely empty. I took out my phone and started to look something up on the internet. The train crept up quietly, and I was pleasantly surprised that it was 5 minutes early. It doesn't happen often. This fact only added positivity, and I literally jumped into its open doors. I wanted to warm up in a warm carriage. It was 25 degrees outside with a huge minus. Entering the warm car, I directly felt how the mood level jumped up another 10 points. Besides, the carriage was absolutely empty. Sit wherever you want. It's beautiful. Soon I'll be home, and ahead of me, 2 days of weekend, for which I have a lot of plans. As soon as I sat down comfortably, the train started to pick up speed. I started to surf the internet, but it was not to be. Somehow all connection with the outside world was cut off in my phone. I didn't even expect such a tragedy from my faithful Samsung. 2 SIM cards, and both not in the network. I rebooted the phone. The same picture. Well, this small trouble could not spoil my mood. I took out my headphones, turned on an audiobook, and reclined on the backrest while waiting for the conductor. A monotonous voice chimed in the headphones, and I fell asleep. When I woke up, a thought popped into my head. Whether I had passed by, my heart was pounding, and I immediately looked at the time. I had been traveling for about an hour already. It should be my station now, but the train was still rushing, not slowing down, and outside the windows there was night, moon, and forest. A boundless forest to the right and to the left. There's still not a soul in the carriage. I felt a bit uneasy. I looked at the electronic board with the ticker, but it was empty. I looked at the phone again, but there was still no connection. Let me, I thought, walk forward through the cars and ask people what was the last stop. I put the phone with headphones in my pocket. I go to the next carriage. Nothing. I keep walking. I pass probably 5 half-dark carriages. Not a soul. My eyes fell on the emergency button. I went to it and pressed it. A wild screeching and hissing sound hit my eardrums, and I jumped back in surprise. My mind was racing, and I didn't know what to do. I looked at the stopcock. It was off. My right hand came up to scratch the back of my head, and then I remembered that I had a hat. I had left it on the seat in the car I had entered at the station. I hurriedly went back for hat. On the way, I noticed that the stopcocks everywhere had been torn off. This only makes me more anxious. But if I had known what was waiting for me on the way to my car, I would not have gone back at all. But I didn't know. In general, I overcome 3 carriages in the direction of the tail, go into the next, and from the opposite end of the carriage enters it. When I saw it, I froze right in the doorway. I broke a sweat and my legs nearly gave out, and a kind of wheeze came out of my throat. It was huge in height and width, and slowly walked toward me on huge bare feet. The shape of the feet were like human feet, only the size. The size of each foot was the size of a child's sled. A single dusty lamp was burning in the carriage. It, like the moon, illuminated a mystical picture that seemed like a dream to me. The creature's huge hands, with palms like the buckets of an excavator, reached to the floor. Its fingers were as thick as my hand, and it had a slouch to walk the height of the car, a huge belly hanging over his pants. This mutant was wearing a conductor's uniform, which was also huge, but it was cracking at the seams from the body he was carrying. The uniform was dirty and tattered. Over his shoulder on a strap hung a large, tattered conductor's leather bag. But the most frightening thing was what sat on her shoulders. It was a huge bald head, all scarred and missing eyeballs, with eyelids sewn shut with mattress stitch. Its mouth was so large that it could fit a medium-sized watermelon. The monster walked slowly forward, groping each seat with his hands. He thoroughly checked all the space in the carriage. He felt under the seats themselves, and even the luggage racks. He mumbled something unintelligible, snorted, grunted, and wheezed. Sometimes you could make out the growling words, "Present your ticket," and then, "HRRR, a ticket, a present it." Then the carriage shook, and my stupor passed. I quickly turned around and rushed back. I ran 10 or maybe even 15 carriages until the figure of a seated man flashed to my right. My brain did not immediately react to this information, and my legs from fear did not obey the order to stop. So I ran to the vestibule and there, by an effort of will, was able to stop my legs. I turned around and looked at the man. The man was dozing by the window in the middle of the car. I jumped up to him to wake him up, and when I grabbed his shoulder, he woke up. "Let's get out of here, or we're dead. There's a mutant in there," I shouted excitedly. "Ah, it's you and the conductor." The passenger grinned bitterly. I was somehow taken aback by his calmness. I opened my mouth to say something, but all the words in my head were completely confused. "Don't worry, sit down. I'll tell you everything," the stranger offered. His calm tone had an effect on me. My cotton legs bent, and I sat down opposite. And he continued. "Between us and the conductor, there are 10, 12 wagons. As you probably noticed, the conductor is blind and moves very slowly. It takes him about 20 minutes to feel the whole car, the vestibule, and to squeeze into the next one, which means it'll take him about 3 hours to get to our car. So I have time to explain to you what's going on here." "What's going on here?" I blurted out the first thing that came into my head. "My name is Georgi Alexandrovich. You could just call me Uncle Zora. I'm a passenger of the ghost train, and now you are too." I took a breath and looked at the fellow traveler. He was twice as old as me, about 60 years old, intelligent looking, with a small graying beard, a little crumpled dark hat on his head, and he was dressed in a dark coat, which also looked a little crumpled. "Why did you call the train a ghost train, and when will my station be?" I continued to ask, picking out the most pressing questions from the ones that were swarming in my head. "Your station will not be there. This train is in another dimension relative to our world," Uncle Zora said sympathetically and continued. "It will be difficult for you to understand all this now, but I will try to explain. The situation is as follows. You and I are in a parallel dimension. This train sometimes stops at stations and picks up passengers, and it takes passengers from our dimension to this parallel dimension. There's always only one passenger, and it's impossible to get back out of it into our world." "How is it?" I asked incredulously. "Look out the window. What do you see?" he said. "It's dark," I answered. "Exactly," my interlocutor confirmed. "It is always night in this world, and the train is rushing through the vast winter taiga. There are trees on both sides, an endless ocean of pine trees, and frost. I've been traveling for over a month, although the concept of time here is very conditional, and nothing changes outside the window. There are only occasional stations, abandoned, deserted, in the middle of the endless taiga. And after the train makes a stop at them, a new passenger appears in it. At the last station, you entered it. Why didn't you get off the train at that moment?" I asked. "The one who gets out of it stays at an abandoned station in the frosty taiga of this strange world, and dies either from the cold or—" Then my interlocutor was silent. "What or?" I whispered. "Did you see the conductor?" he asked. "Imagine the monsters in this taiga. This train is like a check valve. It lets people from our world into its world, but I don't know how to get back out. It all seemed like some kind of delusion or evil prank. I got on the train tonight to go home, and I ended up in the middle of nowhere. The connection's dead. I can't get off, but there's got to be a way out. Listen, if you go forward along the train, you can reach the locomotive, and there are drivers there," I began to reason. "It is in vain," my companion interrupted me. "Firstly, I am even afraid to imagine how the drivers look like here. And secondly, the electric train is endless, or rather to say, beginningless. How can it be?" I was perplexed. "Do not forget, my friend, we are in another world. The laws of our world do not work here. I have been moving forward in the carriages for more than a month. The conductor drives me on. In general, it has no beginning, and it ends right behind the conductor. When he passes another carriage, it disappears immediately. It's as if it vanishes into thin air." "Who's the conductor?" I asked. "One of the natives of this world," he explained. "This world is populated by mutants, each of whom is customized for a specific task. In addition to the conductor, there are road workers, cashiers at the station ticket office, and even law enforcement officers. They're all extremely aggressive, and we're just food for them. I saw a conductor eat Herman. He grabbed him with his hand like a pie, first bit off his head, and then ate all of Herman without a trace. To this day, I can't stop thinking about it. What Herman? I exhaled. Herman became a passenger a few days after me. Uncle Zora began to tell me. I measured the 24 hours with a wristwatch because there is no sunshine here. And then Herman had a theory that it was possible to leave the train if you were behind the conductor. And Herman decided to hide under the seat, hoping that the conductor was blind and would not find him. But the conductor found him. I tried to talk Herman out of it. Uncle Zora lamented, but he wouldn't listen to me. I stood in the vestibule and watched. And when the conductor grabbed him, then that crunch of the skull. All in all, it was a terrible sight. After what I saw, I probably ran 20 carriages. I couldn't calm down. I still get goosebumps. Uncle Zora was silent. I didn't know what to say either. I tried to build some sane picture of what was happening to me. But it wasn't easy. My brain couldn't accommodate the beginningless electricity, couldn't understand how I'd gotten into the other world and what to do about it all. Aren't you hungry? Uncle Zora asked in a fatherly way. His question pulled me out of the chaos of my thoughts, and I felt brutally hungry. Yes, I have a little, I said, embarrassed. Uncle Zora pulled out a sports bag from under the bench and began to pull out some packages. Here is a chicken in foil, bread, tomatoes, cucumber, a cup and a half of soda, he listed. Where did you get the food from? I was surprised. After all, you have been here for a long time. This is another oddity of this train, he began to explain, unwrapping the chicken. The thing is that moving along the carriages, we find in some of them different bags with food and water. They look as if the passenger left at his station and forgot his luggage. Where these bags really come from, we don't know. It feels like someone doesn't want us to starve to death here. Are there any other passengers besides us? Chewing chicken, I asked. Yes, Lekha and Sergei. But they have gone far ahead. Lekha once found a note which said that in the train there is a portal through which you can return to our world. An unknown passenger explained in it that this portal is constantly moving forward through the carriages. It is somehow synchronized with the conductor and is always 1,000 carriages ahead of him. So they go looking for it. It seems to them that they will find a way out, said Uncle Zora, slicing tomatoes and bread. But I think there is no portal, so I'm in no hurry. A huge moon hung in the sky outside the windows, illuminating the endless taiga with a pale ash light. The wheels, like the hooves of some mythical horse, clattered rhythmically on the railroad. Two people in the semi-darkness were eating chicken in the empty carriage of a strange train without a beginning, which was rushing to an unknown place in the expanses of an incomprehensible world. It's hard to imagine a more mystical picture, I thought, crunching a cucumber. We have to move out, said Uncle Zora, looking at his watch. The conductor will be here soon. Yes, by the way, you still haven't introduced yourself, young man. What's your name? He continued. Valera. And you can go by you? I answered. Nice to meet you. He grumbled, standing up. Come on, Valera. Let's get out of here before the conductor comes. Uncle Zora took his bag, and we went through the empty cars, away from the conductor. Count the cars we passed, and I'll count them. Then we'll compare them, he said to me. And I began to curl my fingers, passing another carriage. We passed 7 carriages, and before the door of the 8th, one Uncle Zora stopped abruptly and raised his hand. I understood his gesture and froze too. After a second, he pointed his finger into the dusky space of the carriage in front of us. I looked closer and saw a man lying on the floor. He was lying between the rows of seats, with his feet toward us, and something white was clasped in his right palm. The man did not move, and only the train rocked him from side to side. From time to time, Uncle Zora began to whisper, "The electric train presents the passengers with a surprise carriage. The surprises are different, but, as a rule, always deadly. It's as if an evil experimenter is conducting dangerous experiments on us. At these moments, we must be extremely careful. What are we going to do?" I whispered. "You stay here, and I'll go take a look," Uncle Zora commanded quietly. He put his bag down on the floor, slowly slid the carriage doors open just enough to squeeze in sideways, and, sneaking, moved toward the figure on the floor. I, ready to come to his aid at any second, remained to watch. Creeping up to the figure lying on the floor, he leaned over, then touched it with his hand, and after a second he drew back sharply and sat down on the seat beside it. Then he gestured to me. I approached cautiously. "It's Sergei," Uncle Zora said mournfully. "He's dead." He leaned over and pulled a piece of paper out of Sergei's palm. It was a note from Lyoka. I didn't understand what happened. Lekar wrote in his note. Sergei said he wanted, pardon me, to take a piss and stayed in the vestibule, and I went to the next carriage. I waited for him for about 10 minutes, then followed him. He wasn't there. Went back 3 more cars. Nothing. I figured he'd gone back to your place, so I didn't look for him anymore. I went forward looking for the portal, and 14 carriages later, I see him on the floor, dead. No sign of violence. But how did he get ahead of me? Almost 10 carriages ahead of me. Uncle Zora, be careful. Shit. What to do with the corpse now? There's nowhere to bury it. It's inconvenient to leave it like this. Shall we burn it? Cremation is like a funeral, I suggested, and let the whole car burn to hell. What do we got to lose? No way. Don't set fire to anything. Uncle Zora got worried. We've already tried to burn the car. We thought we'd set it on fire right in front of the conductor, and if the conductor burns in it, we'll get to our own dimension. But it didn't happen. As soon as they started to make a fire out of seats, a fireman appeared. He materialized somewhere in the vestibule on the conductor's side. A monster, I'll tell you, no worse than the conductor, but with eyesight and a helmet. And he's got a hatchet and a fire extinguisher. We almost laid bricks when we saw him. But he put out the fire from the fire extinguisher. He put on his hatchet and ran after us, roaring like a wounded bull, kicking the doors between the cars. I don't know how many carriages we ran away from him. And when I fell down, I thought I was dead. But he disappeared as suddenly as he came. Anyway, I don't advise you to mess around with fire. I can see that you can't play around here. I was impressed by the story. And whose luggage is this? I pointed my finger at a dark backpack on the floor under one of the seats. I don't know. Let's have a look, Uncle Zora suggested. I put the backpack on the seat, opened the zipper, and we began to examine the contents. There were a few hard-boiled eggs, a slice of raw smoked sausage, some bread, a couple of apples, and a thermos with hot tea. In the inner pocket of the backpack, we found some money, about 2,000 rubles, some checks, keys, and a ticket for this train. And then, at the sight of that ticket, I had an idea. Uncle Zora, the conductor demands a ticket, but let's try to show him the ticket. Then we'll be on the other side of the conductor, and we can go to our own world. Well, first of all, we have only one ticket, said Uncle Zora. And secondly, it's dangerous. What if the conductor doesn't like something? He'll eat it and won't ask for my last name. We should start by experimenting with this ticket, but at a safe distance. And then we both looked at Sergei's body. When the conductor will find him on the floor without a ticket, he will eat him anyway, and we can't hide him anywhere anyway. Let's put Sergei on the seat and put this ticket in his hand, and watch what the conductor will do, suggested Uncle Zora. I nodded silently. So we did. Seryoga looked like a passenger who had fallen asleep, and we sat him by the window, facing the tail of the train, right at the entrance to the car. In his right hand was enclosed the ticket found in his backpack. Uncle Zora and I went to the beginning of the carriage and waited for the conductor, shortening our time with conversation. Uncle Zora, why was all the food in the backpack fresh, and even the tea in the thermos was hot? I asked. It's always like that on this train. All the luggage we found, and it looks as if it had just been forgotten by some absent-minded passenger, he answered. Oh man, I feel like some kind of rabbit being experimented on and fed to keep from starving to death. I lamented. I wish I could find out who this evil genius is, who is mocking us like this. There is no genius, just a man knows little even about the world in which he lives, said Uncle Zora. And what to speak of the laws that reign in neighboring worlds? You have to be able to adjust, he continued. You have to try to understand what is going on here. Get to know the rules of the game. So, to speak. Then maybe we can find a way out. Some time passed, and we heard the slamming of doors between the cars and realized that the conductor had reached our car. To be in the same carriage with him was very unpleasant and scary. That's why Uncle Zora and I went out into the vestibule and watched what was happening through the glass of the closed doors. It was calmer that way. We saw how the conductor, muttering some nonsense, squeezed into the car and began to thoroughly probe all the space. He ran his hand over the seat where Seryoga's body was sitting and felt his hand with the ticket. carefully took the ticket, then took out of his bag some device, shoved the ticket into it. A red light on the machine turned on, and a long, unpleasant sound was heard. The conductor started yelling excitedly, grabbed poor Sergei's body, and bit his head off in one fell swoop. I threw up right on the glass through which we were watching. Uncle Zora grabbed my hand and began to lead me away from the conductor. The experiment had failed. The conductor's machine did not recognize tickets from our world. We were filled with despair mixed with disappointment, and fear drove us to get as far away from the conductor as possible. At first, we walked very fast. We didn't count the cars, but then fatigue took its toll, and we took a break. The cars were different. Some were old, dirty, and rusty. They smelled bad, and we didn't want to stay in them. Others looked fairly new and clean. We sat down in one of them. "Let's have some tea," Vaylor wheezed a panting Uncle Zora, taking out of his bag the thermos we had found in his backpack and a couple of candies. The lid of the thermos also served as a glass, and a plastic bowl was enclosed in it. Thus, the thermos was designed for 2 people. I drank from the lid glass, and Uncle Zora drank from the bowl. "Uncle Zora, you were talking about some policemen. Is that the local police?" "Yes, sort of," he said, sipping his tea. "I didn't see them myself. Lekha told me about them. He came here before me." So there were 3 passengers, Lekha himself, Sergei, and Stasik, a half-homeless man. Stasik had been here long before Lyoka and Sergei. They say he liked it here. In our world, he had no housing, but here he had free food and a roof over his head. He even managed to make brew here from various fruits and candies that he got in his bags. One day, they found a note, and it said that you could call the police to the car if you pressed the call button, and, ignoring the noises, shouted the phrase, "We have an emergency," in the car. And then it was said that it was better not to do it, because 2 duty officers would appear and drag away the first person they came across, and you would never see him again. And that it was useless to resist. They had incredible strength, and they looked so strong that your knees would buckle. When Lyoka read the note aloud, then Stasik began to laugh and show off. He said it was all bullshit about the duty officers. I pressed these buttons 100 times and saw no one. Stasik was very drunk on his booze. He began to swear loudly, saying that he had seen all the cops in the grave, that he would smash them all with one left, and all that sort of thing. Then, according to Lyoka's story, Stasik ran to the button, pressed it, and shouted, "We have an emergency in the carriage." From his speakers burst out scraping and hissing. But Stasik didn't care. He yelled at the top of his voice, "We have an emergency in the car." Lekha said that he and Sergei wanted to pull him away from the button. But then something like this happened, and they stayed where they were. 2 men broke in from the vestibule. One was as big as the ceiling, the other about his waist. Horrible scars on their faces. They both wore the remnants of their uniforms. Blue shirts with brown stains on them. The big guys got arms so big the sleeves burst. Both barefoot, but both wearing epaulets. Growling like bears. Their eyes are red and mad. They grabbed Stasik and began to beat him up, knocked out all his teeth, and smashed his face in blood. Then they twisted him up, handcuffed him, and dragged him by his feet back to where they'd come from. Lekha said that he and Seryoga were stunned by what they saw. For a long time afterwards, they were afraid to go further along the carriages. But the conductor drove them from behind, and they had to keep going. They hadn't seen Stasik since then, and the bloody trail from him was interrupted in the passage between the cars. It was as if all 3 of them had simply vanished there. Serious business. I mumbled, not knowing what to say. Then we noticed that the train was slowing down. "It looks like there will be a station." Looking out the window, Uncle Zora said thoughtfully, "And perhaps one more passenger." "Aren't there passengers at every station?" I wondered. "No," he answered. "Sometimes the train stands at the station for quite a long time, as if waiting for its prey. But not always it manages to snatch another poor person from our world. And if we go out at the station and dissuade the passenger to enter," I blurted out, "You're naive, Valera. You won't see the passenger. Don't forget, we are in different realities with them. He is at the station in our native world, and you and I are in the middle of nowhere." In the meantime, the train crept up to the station and finally stopped. The doors slid open with a hiss and a clang. Something inaudible grunted from the speakers. The station was a two-story building with broken, dark windows. The empty, nighttime platform was lit by a pair of dim lanterns. In the wall of the building, there was a single, unbroken, and barred window in which a light was dimly burning. And above it, the letters KS could be seen. The letters had either fallen off or had never been there. But it was clear that it was a cash register. The atmosphere of desolation and semi-darkness was downright mystical. "Can I go out to investigate?" I asked. "You can. Only when you hear the voice from the speakers. Then immediately go into the car. Otherwise, you will stay here forever." "And what's in the building?" I didn't stop. "It's better not to go in there," warned Uncle Zora. "There are such creatures living there that you won't be happy. By the way, if you see anyone on the street, run as fast as you can to the car. They don't usually come in here. They're not supposed to. But if they catch you on the street, they'll eat you. Stop making things worse, Uncle. I'm scared to go out now." "Sure you are," Uncle Zora said meaningfully. "I never go out myself." An eternal frosty night hung over this strange world. But I decided to get out of the car because I had a plan. I decided to go to the ticket office and try to buy a ticket. As I stepped out of the car, I felt a hard frost. Strangely enough, there was no snow anywhere. I only now paid attention to it. Looking around, I saw wagons on both sides, going into the darkness of the forest. Is it really endless? I thought, slowly making my way to the ticket office. The cash window was cloudy, but behind the dusty glass, I could see the silhouette of the cashier. It was impossible to see the occupant of the cashier's office in detail. I didn't really want to. At the bottom of the window, I saw a rusty tray extended to the street. Throwing a $500 bill into it, I pushed it into the cash register and said, "2 tickets," and I pointed 2 fingers out the window in case I was hard of hearing at the ticket office. The silhouette in the window fidgeted, and suddenly the tray with the $500 was knocked back, and from behind the window, there was an unintelligible roar and some swearing. I jumped back in surprise. My heart was pounding. I looked at the doorway in the building. I felt uneasy at the thought that one of its occupants might hear the noise and come out onto the platform. But all was bypassed. Carefully taking my $500 from the tray, I turned my head toward the railroad car, and I saw some movement. Sneaking closer, I saw the outline of a figure under the car, or rather, only its back part. Standing on all fours and sticking his head under the wagon, there was a big man in a dirty orange vest, a hammer, and some other tools lying on the platform next to him. Under the wagon, you could hear his grumbling and metallic tapping. Probably he was fixing some kind of breakage in the lower part of the wagon. Probably the local mechanic. How could he not have noticed me? I thought with horror. I wanted to dive into the car before the mechanic spotted me. But then I saw that from the back pocket of his dirty pants protruded a red piece of identification. It must be a railroad employee's ID card. Flashed in my head, and immediately a plan matured. I snuck up from the rear of the mechanic, sharply snatched the ID card from his pocket, and rushed to the car door. His reaction was simply bestial, and he immediately rushed after me with a roar. Losing precious seconds to climb the iron steps of the car, I already in the vestibule felt that the mutant caught up with me. Sliding the doors to the carriage on the left, where Uncle Zora was waiting for me, I rushed towards the tail of the train. The doors had no sooner closed behind me than I felt the mechanic grab my leg. Collapsing to the floor, I managed to grab the leg of the first seat. Standing on the platform, the mechanic reached with his incredibly long arms to me, and this despite the fact that I was already in the car. Uncle Zora, with a frightened face, rushed to my aid. He grabbed me by my clothes and began to pull me as hard as he could into the car. The situation became a stalemate. The conductor was inevitably approaching us from the rear of the train, and the hydraulic arm of the mechanic was pulling me forward. The forces were not equal, and Uncle Zora and I realized that the mechanic was about to pull me out of the car like a cork out of a bottle. We held on with all our might. Uncle Zora shouted at me to hold on, but my hand unbent my numb fingers one by one. We looked at each other in horror and said goodbye mentally. Suddenly, I remembered the emergency button for the outfit. By some incredible effort, I reached it and, having pressed it, shouted at the top of my voice, "Emergency in our CR! Crash in our car!" And that's when the real creepiness began. An outfit of 2 mutants burst into the vestibule. And the first person they got their hands on was the mechanic, who had invaded the train waist deep and was dragging me by the leg out of the car. In a second, I heard the crunch of bones breaking and the wild shriek of the mechanic. A bloodbath had begun in the vestibule. The wagon was jumping as if it had a herd of elephants dancing on its roof. The two goblins dragged the mechanic into the vestibule and simply dismantled him for parts. The growling and shrieking were so intense that it made my ears pop. Uncle Zora, exhausted, pulled me to the middle of the car. Turning around, I saw that the mechanic's severed arm was still holding my leg and dragging behind me, leaving a bloody trail. And the rest of it was flying around the vestibule under the blows of the men on duty, breaking the glass and the doors of the car. We, dazed, looked at what was happening. Suddenly, the mechanic stopped, and through the broken glass, we saw how the two of them dragged his remains into the passage between the cars. Exhausted, we sat on the floor of the car. An unintelligible but expressive announcement was heard from the speakers again. The train closed its doors with a hiss and continued its endless voyage through the expanses of a strange world. Valera, why the fuck did you snag this mutant? Uncle Zora wheezed angrily. I took out a freshly stolen ID card from my pocket and gave it to Uncle Zora. What do you need it for? Holding on to his heart, he continued. I'll show it to the ticket office and get a couple of local tickets so we can get off this fucking train, I muttered. That's an interesting theory, colleague, he said, except that it almost got your head blown off. Come on, Uncle Ver, everything turned out all right. But now, at the next station, I'll get tickets for us. I'm afraid to imagine what it will look like. He continued his sarcasm as he handed me back the crust. I grinned and opened the ID card to see the trophy. It was as cartoonish as everything in this incomprehensible world. The smooth lines consisted of a mixture of Cyrillic and Latin letters. Capital and uppercase letters were arranged in random order. It was impossible to read anything, but everything was serious, even the owner's photo with a large round seal. The wrinkled face in the photo was hideous. The eyes, one of which was higher than the other, expressed a complete lack of intelligence. The lipless mouth bared large and yellow horse teeth. 2 slits instead of a nose, and huge ears completed the picture. Uncle Jer, do you think the cashier will notice that I'm not in the photo? Come on, you're like twins. Just the same face. He laughed hoarsely and said, after this joke, we could not get up from the floor. Adrenaline was leaving the vessels of our bodies, and we were covered with nervous laughter. We laughed until we cramped, until we cried, rolling on the floor. When we had laughed, I tried to free my leg from the mechanic's grip, but it wasn't easy. The grip of his fingers was literally dead. His arm was ripped right out of my shoulder, 2 meters long and very weighty, hanging from my leg like a weight. Apparently, a spasm had tightened the iron grip of the huge fingers, and the dead hand wouldn't let go of my leg. Cut the tendons, said Uncle Zora, holding out his knife to me. I took the knife and began to cut the back of the dead hand. The fingers began to loosen one by one, and I was finally able to free my leg. In the semi-darkness of the car, on the floor lay a huge hand of the mechanic. Its hand, like a predatory spider, swayed in time with the movement of the train, and we wanted to leave the car as soon as possible. It seemed that now the hand would come to life and grab someone's throat. Uncle Joe, let's get out of here, I suggested. I didn't want to wait for the conductor. He silently took his bag, and we carefully bypassed the hand and went to the vestibule. Having opened the door, we saw a nightmarish picture. The vestibule was covered with the blood of the mechanic. It dripped from the ceiling, flowed from the walls, and on the floor there were knocked out teeth, some bloody fragments, and a huge eye. Shards of broken glass crunched underfoot. The walls and doors were dented from the blows. What we saw chilled us to the bone. We were afraid to go any further. What if those two were waiting for us in the next vestibule? Uncle Zora entered the passage between the cars. The blood trail was interrupted there. He opened the door of the vestibule of the next car. It was empty. There was nothing suspicious in the carriage either. Valer, we need to pass 10 or 12 carriages so that we can have a quiet snack and take a nap, said Uncle Zora without stopping. Not a problem, I replied, limping. After the iron grip of the mechanic, my leg was sore, but I was ready to bear it, just to get away from that bloody car and the impending conductor. After walking 3 carriages, we found a large plastic bag and a lady's purse. The bag contained an expensive sausage, brandy, a can and a half of Coke, fruit, chocolate, and a jar of olives. The pink purse was lying next to it, and on a rhinestone label of 3 Latin letters glittered, NGA inside, a standard ladies' kit. Nothing interesting, except for a stun gun, which we had brought with us. Uncle Zora transferred the found foodstuffs into his bag, and we moved on. After 9 more wagons, we decided to make a break. We got some food and had a small feast with brandy. Then fatigue took its toll, and we dozed off. I woke up to Uncle Zora shaking me by the shoulder. "What happened, Uncle Zora?" I jumped up. "The train stopped," he said. "Another station." I looked out the window. In the darkness on the empty platform stood a concrete ticket office and a couple of broken benches under a rusty awning. The whole night landscape was illuminated by a barely living lantern on a pole. The window of the ticket office flickered faintly, as if a candle was burning there or the electric bulb had a bad contact. I stepped out onto the platform and breathed in the frosty air. Uncle Zora stood in the vestibule and watched me. "Uncle Zora, why is there no snow here?" I asked softly from the platform. "It's winter, I think." "I don't know," he replied. "As long as I've been traveling here, I've never seen snow." Looking around, I slowly approached the cashier's window, put the ID card I had stolen from the mechanic and a $500 bill into the rusty tray. With a creak, I slid the tray into the bowels of the cash register and said loudly, "2 tickets," pointing 2 fingers through the window. Behind the cloudy glass, a not insignificant shadow moved. An inarticulate mumbling was heard, and in a few seconds the tray popped out. It contained my ID card, my 502 tickets made of thick cardboard. At that moment, an unintelligible announcement came from the loudspeakers, and I realized that the train was about to start. Grabbing everything that was in the tray, I rushed into the car and had barely slid into the vestibule when the doors closed. "Well," Uncle Zora said impatiently. I handed him 1 ticket. "Wow," Uncle Zora said, carefully taking a small cardboard card with a stamp and a series of random letters. "These are local tickets." He continued. "Yes, this one is yours, and this one is mine." I demonstrated my ticket, and they were free of charge. Apparently, 1 ID is enough. Meanwhile, the train was picking up speed, and we went into the car and sat down on the sofa. "Uncle Ver, let's wait for the conductor, and I'll stand in the aisle and show him the ticket. You will stand a little behind me, also in the aisle, so to speak, at a low start. If this mutant doesn't like the ticket, we'll have a chance to get away from him. Well, and if everything goes normally, then next you will show him your ticket." "That's a good plan," nodded Uncle Zora approvingly. "But I feel sorry for Lyoka," I continued. "Is he really going to stay here forever? We can't catch up with him anyway. He's gone far ahead," said Uncle Zora. "He and Sergei chose their own way. Sergei died, and I'm not sure if Lekha is alive now. And you and I have a chance. It's risky, but we must check it out." "Uncle Zora, what's going on behind the conductor? Why do cars disappear behind him?" "I don't really know. Maybe the car becomes a portal to our world. We don't want to leave this carriage. It seemed that it brings luck, and it was in it that our tickets would be lucky." After a while, we heard the door slam in the vestibule and saw the conductor. He was struggling to squeeze through the doors of the car. His unintelligible mumbling gave me a kind of quiet terror. I wanted to run away immediately. But controlling myself, I took a stun gun from Uncle Zora just in case and walked into the middle of the car. Pulling out the ticket in my hand, I stood there ready to run away in case of failure. Uncle Zora stood 5 steps behind me in the same readiness to leave the carriage. We realized that the conductor would not run after us, but his inhuman reaction and long arms, buckets, made us on guard. Feeling the space of the car, he slowly came at me. Several times in his muttering, I recognized the phrase, "Show me your ticket." Finally, he fumbled for my outstretched hand with the ticket, took it carefully, and went into his bag for his control device. My heart was pounding at an alarming rate. I clutched my stun gun in my hand and prepared to jump back if his machine started to buzz. He took out his strange machine and shoved my ticket into it. The machine rumbled satisfactorily, beeped briefly, and the green light on it turned on. The conductor took my ticket out of the machine and, muttering the word "order," handed the punctured ticket to me. I took the ticket and sat down on the seat. The conductor groped the carriage and moved on to Uncle Zora. Uncle Zora, seeing that the tickets fit, calmed down a bit and sat down on the sofa too. I watched what was happening from behind this mutant, but I was afraid to utter a word, so as not to scare away my luck. Uncle Zora, as well as I, successfully passed the control, and the conductor began to squeeze into the vestibule, having groped which he went into the next car. For some time we sat in our seats, as if dumbfounded, and could not understand what we should do next. Our carriage did not disappear anywhere. Nothing changed. The train continued to go through the night taiga. Then Uncle Zora got up and silently walked over to me. He looked at me, and I at him. What next? For some reason I whispered. I don't know, he answered. Let's check the previous carriage. Maybe it's missing? I suggested, and we want to check it. When we entered the vestibule of the neighboring car and made sure that it was not missing, we froze from surprise. The light was on in the car, and there were people in it. A second wave of stupor came over me and Uncle Zora. We stood silently as halted in the vestibule and looked at the passengers through the glass in the door. There were not many of them. A young couple with a girl running around the carriage, a serious man with a briefcase, and two lively grandmothers talking animatedly. I don't know how long we stood like that, but Uncle Zora was the first to come to his senses. I don't understand, he said in a long voice. Are we back? And why didn't our carriage disappear? It was obvious that he had a lot of questions swarming in his head. His face expressed some kind of disbelief at what was happening, as if he suspected that all this was just another experiment, and the passengers in the car were not real. Then he slowly turned around and went to our car, opened the doors to the vestibule, and we saw that the lights were on there too, and passengers were coming. Just a minute ago, it was an empty and dark carriage of a ghostly electric train, but now there were passengers, riding as if nothing had happened. Valera, our car is gone. Another one has taken its place. Yes, I answered. It turns out that's how it happens. You have to move to another carriage to get to our world. Uncle Zora stepped into the car, and I followed him. We walked slowly down the aisle, looking at the passengers, then into another carriage, then into the third. Staring at people, we looked ridiculous, and probably everyone took us for some crazy bums. We gradually realized that we had managed to escape from the creepy world of the ghostly train. The people around us were real. Everyone was going about their business. Uncle Zora turned to me. Tears were visible in his eyes. Apparently, in that dark world, he had lost faith that he would ever be able to return. We did it, he said and gave me a fatherly hug. I embraced him too. A wave of joy swept over us. Our legs felt woozy, and we sat down on the seat. Our faces shone with happiness. And the train began to slow down, and a woman's voice announced that the stop was called 666 kilometer, and that the next station was Liski. At that time, we did not know where we were, because each of us entered the ghostly train from different cities, but apparently it was possible to get out of it only here on the platform of the 666 kilometer. That was where the return portal was. It was still dark outside the window, but it was clearly a different train, and we now knew where we were going. This was our world.